Hey guys, if you're in the vacation rental or short-term lodging space and want to use AI into your business, then this video is for you. So say for example, if you use Lodgify to manage your business, you might want to have a way to give the information that's inside your system to the potential users or the potential clients that might come and stay in your places. Now, a way of doing this is through voice. Another way is to a chatbot or a voice bot onto your website. So let's go through how you would cover that or how you would add that. So here's a simple workflow that sort of explains exactly how you do that, feedback integration, so on and so on. And then we have a exact workflow that I've created in the past that I'll go into in a small amount of detail because I don't want to overwhelm you. And then we have a way of storing this information as new messages come in. How do you give feedback? How do you incorporate that so that the AI gets smarter? And then here are just other examples for not exactly lodging, but here's an example for property management where somebody might ask a question about what kind of pet limitations are there, or somebody else might ask a question about who pays if there's a property damage that happens. And then obviously you can have a concierge system over here where this actually helps them pick out the perfect space and actually do booking and all those things. So anyways, with that, let's get into the video and see you there. Started then. So here what I have is I have a workflow and some considerations to make when creating a chatbot for a short stay accommodation use case. So let's get started and look at the workflow. So we have three distinct pieces. We have conversation channels, we have the retrieval of the conversation, we have the AI agent, and then we have the sending back of the conversation back through the appropriate conversation channel. So obviously you have to store this information so that when this API call is made, you don't lose the fact that you have a certain location to send this back to. So in terms of conversation channels, for ManyChat, we have WhatsApp and Instagram handling that. We have a website. So on the website, most likely we have a JavaScript bot that sits on top of it. And if you want, we can also set up a call type of thing. So this is through Vappy where somebody can call and they can essentially chat with this, exact same, well, not exact same, but some tweaks to this type of an agent, and they can get a similar type of service, especially if you're getting after hours calls. Many times people will reach out by phone after hours because that's where they're done with their work and now they're looking for places to stay for their trip or whatever it is. So this is also doable if you wish as an additional channel. So you would want to retrieve the conversation that has already been had. Now, the way that you would do this is either, you get their phone email, that way you can pull out the information related to that. You store a little session ID of that particular session. So, but if they reload the page, then this disappears. Or you have to use cookies and these will persist longer, but you also need permission and all that stuff. So, for the ones that don't give you permission, then it's a little hard to figure out what to do. Usually this is the easiest approach. So, this usually handles most of the situations unless they're logged in. If they're logged in, then this whole issue resolves itself as well. Okay, you put together the conversation history. And then in the agent, essentially you have a few different routes. And these are the routes you mentioned, but obviously we can have more as well if necessary. So what happens here is we have, you know, um, the FAQs. And in the FAQs, there's a few ways of getting this information. Either if it's small enough, you can actually just preload that into the context. So, with huge context windows right now, with Gemini, with ChatGPT, it's actually possible to just load in 10, 15 pages worth of FAQs and have really, really solid answers from that. If you have longer FAQs than that, then obviously it is possible to get that information via RAG. And the other way to do RAG also is to do RAG on prior conversations. So if you have stored, specific ways that a question needs to be answered, then you can give that information in the agent's prompt, but you can also give that information inside a table, and then we can do RAG against the questions pull out that information and then answer that question exactly the way that we have sort of written it down rather than letting the agent decide. Okay, then we have questions related to real-time availability and booking, payment links, all this stuff that, we'll first have to check to logify and then, craft the response to. So if we have, lastly, if we need to escalate, or if we have other types of things that might happen, like, if they're cussing out our bot for some reason, or if they're, asking if you're AI or whatever, then we'll have, a third category here, which can either escalate or, it can answer in a predefined manner. So with escalation, you have to get their contact information. That way you can obviously take into account the entire conversation history. You can have that be sent over to you in an email, but you also need to have their contact info so that in that email, once you've read through the conversation, then you can reach back out to them and be able to essentially respond to whatever problems, issues that they're having. Okay, then you will store the response. So the way that you can get this conversation history is you have to sort of store that inside a database. Usually Supabase works very well for this. And then you have to send it back through the channel. So that's all in all how the workflow would look like for a bot like this. And a important piece over here is also to make sure that we integrate the feedback that we get from our employees that are looking through the conversations that have happened. So usually what I do is like every week I will have like a time trigger where every week we will pull in all of the conversations that have happened for that week, and we'll put it inside an Airtable like this, very similar to this. And inside here, you have the full conversation, you have the customer service agents comments, maybe you have other classifications over here as well as the conversation ID, so that you can get a good idea of what happened, and then you can essentially integrate whatever comment that was left in order to improve the bot so that the next time it responds more correctly. So if I go back here, you can see you will pull out the conversations, review or give feedback to it, and you will aggregate and integrate the feedback. So this will essentially aggregate all of the feedbacks that you've given across the rows, and it will do this automatically, and it will integrate it inside the prompt itself. So it will update the prompt, and it's also going to, if you wish, update the RAG on the new response. So what this relates to is, as I mentioned over here, if you want, you can actually do RAG against questions itself. So what we can do is if we say, okay, we're recognizing that a certain type of question is being answered a certain way, and we don't like that, we want it to be fixed. For example, let's say you have a question related to cleanup after the guest leaves, right? And for some reason that answer is coming out wrong over and over again, then we might want to mark it so that this gets loaded into the RAG, and then that question is being answered exactly that way every time. Okay. So common pitfalls to avoid when we're creating an agent like this is one, or considerations is one, do we want to stream the output or not? So this is like, if you make the decision not to do this, then usually you have to wait 20-25 seconds. If you do this, then what happens is within 4 or 5 seconds, you can start streaming the output out just like ChatGPT. It just affects the way the front end looks and some of the features in the front end, as well as the technology you're using, because what you're using has to be able to do SSE, which is server sent events. Now, I'm not sure if Make does this or Zapier allows this, but yeah, that's one thing that's very, very important to check out before you embark on this project. The next thing is not doing the math. So if you have only like 10 communications in a day, I don't know if it's really useful for you to do this. It might not be worth the I guess the investment to do something like this. If it's like super simple type of questions, you can very easily just pick that up, paste it into GPT with your FAQs, and just send the answer back. But if that's not the case, then you should definitely go through with the creation of an agent like this. Okay, not including employee feedback. So what I've realized is like the person who's doing this and the employee, the customer support, they will have a lot of edge cases that they have thought through and that they encounter, but you might not see those because as the owner, as the founder, you only see like, things from your level, but the person who's in the weeds doing this, they will see a lot of these different edge cases and issues that might come up, and it's very important to get their feedback beforehand so that we can incorporate that while we're building out the agent's brain over here. Okay. User testing and feedback. So it's very important to have this sort of process where we can actually improve the agent rather than having it static. And you should also be able to update the knowledge base. So the FAQs, all of these things have to be something that can get updated and it's not static inside the agent's brain. So that's very, very important. And lastly, I already mentioned the RLHF factor where you have this sort of reinforcement learning piece where you are learning and improving the agent based on the different interactions it's had. Okay, so let's figure out the tech stack here. Now, here are just a few options, and we can go through these in further detail. So we have the front end. Here are the pieces we have to select. We have to select a front end, back end, the LLM, as well as the data layer. So the front end, obviously, for one of the pieces is going to be WhatsApp, Instagram, and whatever other channels we have for messaging into it. We have the orchestration happening in Notion or Airtable, and this is in this example, orchestration means that this is where we're going to be leaving feedback like this and also doing the monitoring of these things from here. So, all of the conversation history, all of the feedback giving, all of this is going to be done through either of these tools. Could also be ClickUp or any sort of tabular interface, even Google Sheets, but it's just hard to use Google Sheets. It's not as automation friendly, so usually I go for ClickUp or Airtable, Notion, something like that. And then lastly, on the front end side, you will also need, if you want to place this on your website, you need something custom like this. So if I go back here, this is a custom JavaScript which was created. So it essentially just resides on top of your website, and we can usually put it on almost anything, unless you're using like a managed website. Um, Even then, we're usually able to put it. It's just you just have to test it out to see if it allows JavaScript insertion and also any sort of like outgoing API requests. So if it doesn't do that, then you might run into an issue. So let's come back. Okay. So you either are going to do custom or you might use some of the pre-built things like intercom, bot press, or front. Regardless of what you choose, you will still need to integrate via a JavaScript snippet. So that issue would still come, but it's just, if you have a preference on these and you would want to pay for the cost that is associated with these, then you can go ahead. Usually it's like 70 to 80 bucks plus a certain amount of fee if you're, if you're going to be using their API feature. So that's an evaluation that you have to do. Usually custom is easy enough, so that's what I've gone for in the past when I've built these out. Okay, so on the backend side, we have Annotate, Zapier, Make. Zapier being very expensive. It is slightly easier to use, I would say. But if ease is very important, then I think Make is a very good choice. But Anytime, in terms of versatility, it can do almost anything, so I would use this. And then for the streaming feature, if necessary, we might be using a Google function. Okay, on the LLM side, essentially we'll just test with these three. Usually ChatGPT does well enough for these type of things, so we'll most likely just end up using this. But what the way to test the LLM, which is best, is usually just to run 15 examples of conversations that we've had in the past and just see what each of these reply with and just go with the one which gives the best reply. These are super easy to swap and everything, especially if you use something like OpenRouter. It's super easy to swap these out. Okay. Now, this is for the voice side of things. So if we do wish to use voice, then you would use something like Pappy or Retail. Okay, lastly, we have the data layer. In the data layer, you have the storage of the knowledge inside either Pinecone or Supabase. Supabase, it's actually very easy to update the knowledge base. So, if we want to make changes to the knowledge base, it's very easy to just change a single file and then send that as the update instead of having to sort of wipe everything clean, and then send through another um, send through all the files back up into the database. But yeah, either of these are really usable for that. In terms of the knowledge base, you can store that in Drive, Notion, SharePoint. So knowledge base essentially refers to the the FAQ documents or any other documents you want to use. And the distinction between the vector database and knowledge database is this is what you understand as a human, this is what the computer understands. So this, whatever you put here, has to be converted into numbers which are stored inside here. And then lastly, you have transactional data, which is to be stored either in Notion, Airtable, Supabase, ClickUp, as I already mentioned. Transactional data is going to be, in our case, the conversations that we have. All right, so let's go over to the examples. Essentially, here we have a example of a chatbot. Now, if I'm going to just ask a question like, okay, so we're going to have the answers streaming in like this. And this is what I mean by streaming. You don't have to wait 20 seconds for the answers. And you still have the answers in a very detailed fashion. Obviously, you can control the verbosity of this, not a problem. But yeah, so this is an example of this. Let's go back over here. What I have over here is the backend of a agent. Essentially, this is we've got a bunch of different routes here. Now, does it have to be this complex? Not necessarily. First, we usually just take the simplest approach where you just put everything inside a single agent node and see if that works. Now, if that doesn't work, then you start pulling out different pieces from it, and things which you want to be more deterministic, you start putting them into different routes. And even though this looks complex, it's not that crazy of a setup. Essentially, we're just pulling out different pieces and putting them into different routes so that when a question that is very specific to a certain type of thing is asked, we put the answer, or we route it through that method and give a more exact answer. And then we also have like more generic ones which are able to handle some of the more dynamic questions. So this is essentially what's happening here. You have multiple different incoming messages. This is where you have a few different sources. You have Anytime Chat, you have the email system that we have over here for these guys. And then you have the agent over here. And once you get an answer from the agent, we keep it modular so that you have the incoming messages are separate from the outgoing messages and separate from the agent. Once this is done, it gets called in this process, and then we essentially send that message out and store the response inside Airtable so that we have the observability. Okay, so that's essentially all I wanted to cover. I've done this for these guys as well, very, very similar type of process. And, sometimes we also give the option to, go to a specific website where they can, get more information and so on. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any extra questions, if you want to learn more, and if you want to book a quick, you know, 10-15 minute call. Let's hop on and see how I can help. But thank you. Have a good one and enjoy your day. Bye bye.